Sarah Martinez had always been different from other girls in her small Texas town. While her classmates painted their nails and talked about boys, she spent weekends at the shooting range with her grandfather, a Vietnam veteran who taught her that precision was everything. Her steady hands and sharp eyes made her a natural marksman, but nobody expected those skills would one day make her one of the most feared snipers in military history. The dusty training grounds of Fort Benning stretched endlessly under the scorching Georgia sun. Sarah wiped sweat from her forehead as she adjusted her position behind the Barrett M82 rifle. The weapon was massive, weighing nearly 30 pounds, but in her hands it felt like an extension of her body. Around her, dozens of other recruits struggled with the heat and the demanding training regimen. But Sarah remained focused on the distant target 800 meters away. Sergeant Williams walked behind the line of prone shooters, his boots crunching on the dry grass. He stopped behind Sarah, watching as she controlled her breathing and squeezed the trigger with perfect technique. The .50 caliber round thundered from the barrel, and through the spotting scope, Williams saw the target's center ring explode in a cloud of paper and cardboard. "Outstanding shot, Martinez," he said, making notes on his clipboard. Sarah had been at the top of her class since day one of sniper school. Her instructors had never seen anyone with such natural ability, combined with unwavering determination. While other students complained about the physical demands and mental pressure, Sarah embraced every challenge as an opportunity to prove herself. The other recruits began to take notice of the quiet girl from Texas who never missed her target. Some whispered that she was too small, too young, too inexperienced for the elite sniper program. Sarah heard their doubts but never let them shake her confidence. She knew that in combat, size and age meant nothing. What mattered was the ability to make impossible shots when lives hung in the balance. During the final week of training, the instructors announced a special competition. Each student would attempt a series of increasingly difficult shots, starting at 600 meters and ending at over a mile. The winner would receive recognition as the top graduate and first choice of deployment assignments. Sarah felt her heart race with excitement. This was her chance to prove that she belonged among the military's best snipers. As the competition began, Sarah watched her fellow students struggle with the longer distances. The wind was tricky that day, gusting unpredictably across the range. One by one, shooters missed their targets and shook their heads in frustration. When Sarah's turn came, she settled behind her rifle with the same calm confidence she had shown since the beginning of training. The first shot at 600 meters was easy. The second at 800 meters found its mark perfectly. As the distance increased to 1,000 meters and beyond, Sarah continued to hit her targets with mechanical precision. The instructors exchanged glances, realizing they were witnessing something special. By the end of the competition, Sarah had hit every single target, including the final shot at nearly 1,500 meters. Sergeant Williams approached her with a mixture of admiration and amazement in his eyes. "Martinez," he said, "in 20 years of training snipers, I've never seen shooting like that. You're ready for anything the battlefield can throw at you." Sarah simply nodded, knowing that her real test would come not on a training range, but in the chaos and danger of actual combat. 3 weeks later, Sarah received her deployment orders. She was being sent to Afghanistan as part of an elite reconnaissance unit. As she packed her gear and prepared to leave for her first combat tour, Sarah thought about her grandfather's words. "A sniper's job isn't just about taking lives, Sarah. Sometimes it's about saving them." She would soon learn exactly what he meant. The helicopter's rotors beat against the thin mountain air as Sarah gazed down at the rugged landscape of Afghanistan. Below her stretched endless valleys carved between towering peaks, their slopes dotted with ancient villages that had witnessed countless conflicts throughout history. This would be her home for the next 18 months, and Sarah felt a mixture of nervousness and excitement as the aircraft descended toward Forward Operating Base Schenck. Captain Rodriguez, her new commanding officer, met Sarah at the landing zone. He was a weathered veteran with kind eyes and scars that told stories of previous deployments. "Welcome to paradise, Martinez," he said with a wry smile as dust swirled around them. "Hope you're ready to put that training to good use." Sarah shouldered her gear and followed him across the base, taking in the controlled chaos of military life in a combat zone. The briefing room was cramped and stuffy, filled with maps covered in red pins marking enemy positions and recent incidents. Rodriguez explained their mission: Sarah would be part of a 4-person sniper team tasked with providing overwatch for infantry patrols and gathering intelligence on insurgent activities in the region. Her spotter would be Corporal Jackson, an experienced soldier from Alabama who had already completed 2 tours in Iraq. Jackson was initially skeptical about working with the young female sniper. He had seen too many promising soldiers crack under the pressure of combat, and Sarah looked barely old enough to be out of high school. However, his doubts began to fade during their first practice session at the base's shooting range. Sarah's shots were not just accurate. They were impossibly precise, grouping within inches at distances that challenged even veteran marksmen. Their first mission came just 3 days after Sarah's arrival. Intelligence reports indicated that insurgents were using a mountain pass to smuggle weapons and fighters into the valley. Sarah's team was assigned to establish an observation post on a ridge overlooking the route and report any enemy movement. As they hiked through the darkness before dawn, Sarah felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. The observation post was little more than a collection of rocks and camouflage netting, but it provided an excellent view of the pass below. Sarah set up her rifle while Jackson prepared his spotting equipment. They would maintain this position for the next 72 hours, watching and waiting for any sign of enemy activity. The mountain air was cold and thin, making every breath a conscious effort. On the second day, Jackson spotted movement through his scope. A convoy of pickup trucks was winding its way through the pass, carrying armed men and suspicious cargo. Sarah adjusted her position and peered through her rifle scope, studying the vehicles and their occupants. This was her first opportunity to engage real enemies, not paper targets on a training range. The lead vehicle stopped suddenly, and several armed men jumped out to investigate something on the road ahead. Through her scope, Sarah could see that one of them was pointing directly at their position. Somehow the insurgents had detected the observation post. Jackson immediately began calling for backup, while Sarah tracked the enemy fighters through her crosshairs. The situation escalated quickly when the insurgents began moving to flank their position. Sarah knew they had only minutes before being overrun. She made a split-second decision and lined up her first shot on an enemy fighter, who was advancing with a rocket-propelled grenade. The M82 roared, and the target dropped instantly. Her first kill in combat was clean and necessary, but Sarah felt no satisfaction. Only the grim determination to protect her team. More insurgents appeared, trying to use the rocky terrain for cover as they approached the observation post. Sarah worked methodically, taking carefully aimed shots while Jackson called out targets and distances. Each round from her rifle found its mark, but the enemy continued to advance. The sound of approaching helicopters gave Sarah hope, but she knew they had to hold their position until reinforcements arrived. When the rescue helicopters finally appeared over the ridge, Sarah had fired 17 rounds and eliminated multiple threats. The insurgents retreated into the maze of caves and valleys, leaving behind weapons and equipment in their haste to escape. As the team was extracted to safety, Jackson looked at Sarah with newfound respect. "Damn fine shooting, Martinez," he said. "You might just survive this deployment after all." Word of Sarah's exceptional marksmanship spread quickly throughout the base and beyond. Within weeks of her first combat engagement, other units began requesting her team for high-priority missions. Sarah found herself deployed on increasingly dangerous assignments, from protecting convoy routes to eliminating high-value targets that threatened coalition forces. With each mission, her reputation grew, and so did the number etched in her personal logbook. The mountain village of Korengal had been a hotbed of insurgent activity for months. Intelligence reports indicated that a notorious bomb maker was using the settlement as his base of operations, constructing improvised explosive devices that had killed dozens of coalition soldiers. Sarah's team received orders to establish surveillance and eliminate the target if the opportunity presented itself. The approach to their overwatch position required a grueling, 12-hour hike through treacherous terrain. Sarah and her team moved under cover of darkness, carrying nearly 80 pounds of equipment each. The thin air at 8,000 feet elevation made every step a struggle, but Sarah pushed forward with the same determination that had carried her through sniper school. By dawn, they had established a concealed position with a clear view of the village below. Through her scope, Sarah observed the daily rhythms of village life. Women carried water from the well, children played in the dusty streets, and old men gathered in the shade to drink tea and discuss the day's events. It looked peaceful and ordinary, but Sarah knew that appearances could be deceiving in this part of the world. Somewhere among those innocent-looking buildings, a man was building weapons designed to kill her fellow soldiers. On the third day of surveillance, Jackson spotted their target through his high-powered spotting scope. The bomb maker emerged from a nondescript building, carrying a small package that he handed to a younger man on a motorcycle. Sarah tracked the target through her rifle scope, noting his movements and behavior patterns. The shot would be challenging, nearly 900 meters through swirling mountain winds, but well within her capabilities. Captain Rodriguez's voice crackled through their radio, giving Sarah permission to engage. She controlled her breathing and felt her heartbeat slow as she entered the focused state that had become second nature. The crosshairs settled on the target's center mass, and Sarah made the minute adjustments necessary to compensate for wind and elevation. The M82 bucked against her shoulder, and through the scope she watched the target fall. The village erupted in confusion as people ran for cover, not knowing where the shot had come from. Sarah's team immediately began their extraction, moving quickly through predetermined routes to avoid detection. By the time insurgent fighters arrived to search for the sniper, Sarah and her teammates were already miles away, hiking toward their pickup point. Intelligence later confirmed that the bomb maker's death had significantly disrupted insurgent operations in the region. Several planned attacks were canceled when the explosives expert could not be replaced. Sarah felt a grim satisfaction knowing that her shot had likely saved the lives of coalition soldiers and innocent civilians who might have been victims of the man's deadly devices. As months passed, Sarah's kill count steadily climbed. Each confirmed elimination was carefully documented and verified by multiple sources. Her accuracy rate remained near perfect, a statistical anomaly that impressed even the most experienced military analysts. But Sarah never lost sight of the human cost of her profession. Every target had been a person with family and friends, regardless of their allegiances or actions. The psychological pressure of being a sniper began to weigh on some of Sarah's fellow soldiers, but she found ways to cope with the stress. She wrote letters to her grandfather, describing the landscape and culture of Afghanistan while carefully avoiding details about her missions. She also began studying the local language, finding that understanding the words and conversations around her helped her maintain perspective on her role in the conflict. During a particularly difficult period when her unit suffered casualties from an improvised explosive device attack, Sarah volunteered for a dangerous mission to eliminate the insurgent cell responsible. The target was a skilled fighter who had evaded capture for over a year, but intelligence had finally pinpointed his location in a fortified compound near the Pakistani border. The mission required Sarah to take an extremely long-range shot, over 1,400 meters from an exposed position that would leave her vulnerable to counterattack. As she settled behind her rifle and studied the target through her scope, Sarah thought about the soldiers who had died because of this man's actions. Her finger found the trigger, and once again her shot flew true across the impossible distance. The record-breaking shot at 1,400 meters became legendary among coalition forces, but Sarah barely had time to process the achievement before her next assignment arrived. Intelligence had identified a gathering of high-ranking insurgent leaders, planning a major offensive against coalition bases. The meeting was scheduled to take place in a remote compound that could only be approached from one direction, making it a perfect target for a precision strike. Sarah's team spent 2 weeks preparing for the mission, studying satellite imagery and planning multiple escape routes. The target compound sat atop a rocky plateau surrounded by steep cliffs, accessible only by a narrow mountain path that insurgents heavily guarded. Getting close enough for an effective shot would require infiltrating deep into enemy territory and remaining undetected for several days. The insertion began before dawn on a moonless night. Sarah and her team were dropped by helicopter in a valley 15 kilometers from their objective. Then began the arduous journey on foot through some of Afghanistan's most unforgiving terrain. They moved only at night, hiding during daylight hours in carefully selected positions that provided concealment from both ground and air observation. By the third night, they had reached a ridge overlooking the target compound. Sarah established her firing position among a cluster of boulders that provided natural camouflage, while offering an unobstructed view of the building where the meeting would take place. The distance was just over 1,000 meters, a challenging shot made more difficult by the unpredictable mountain winds that could deflect even a .50 caliber round. Jackson set up his spotting equipment while the other team members prepared defensive positions in case their location was discovered. Through her scope, Sarah could see guards patrolling the compound's perimeter and movement inside the main building. Intelligence indicated that the meeting would begin at sunset, giving her a narrow window of opportunity to identify and engage the targets. As the appointed hour approached, Sarah watched through her scope as vehicles began arriving at the compound. Heavily armed men emerged from pickup trucks and disappeared into the building, their faces obscured by traditional headwear and tactical gear. Sarah would need to wait for a clear identification of the primary target before taking her shot, but she knew that hesitation could mean losing the opportunity entirely. The breakthrough came when a distinctive figure emerged onto the building's rooftop terrace. Intelligence photos had burned the target's face into Sarah's memory, a notorious commander responsible for coordinating attacks across 3 provinces. He stood near the terrace's edge, apparently surveying the surrounding landscape for potential threats. Sarah steadied her breathing and began her firing sequence. The shot required compensation for wind drift, bullet drop, and the slight upward angle to the target. Sarah made the necessary adjustments based on Jackson's whispered calculations, then settled into the focused state that had become her trademark. The M82's thunderous report echoed off the surrounding peaks, and through her scope, Sarah watched the target crumple to the ground. The compound immediately erupted in chaos as guards scrambled to identify the shooter's position. Sarah's team began their withdrawal even before confirming the hit, knowing that insurgent reinforcements would soon flood the area. They had practiced the escape route dozens of times, but executing it under enemy fire while carrying heavy equipment tested every aspect of their training and endurance. The extraction point was a clearing 8 kilometers away where a helicopter would pick them up at a predetermined time. Sarah's team had exactly 4 hours to cover the distance while avoiding pursuit by an unknown number of enemy fighters who knew the terrain far better than they did. The mission's success would mean nothing if they couldn't make it to the pickup point alive. As they moved through the darkness, Sarah reflected on how much she had changed since arriving in Afghanistan. The nervous young woman who had stepped off the helicopter months earlier had been replaced by a confident, experienced warrior who had proven herself in the crucible of combat. Her kill count now exceeded 200 confirmed eliminations, a number that would have seemed impossible during her training days. The helicopter appeared exactly on schedule, its crew scanning the landing zone for signs of enemy activity. Sarah's team sprinted across the open ground and dove into the aircraft just as the first enemy tracers began streaking through the night sky. As they lifted off and banked away from the mountains, Sarah allowed herself a moment of satisfaction, knowing that another major threat to coalition forces had been eliminated. Back at base, the mission debriefing revealed the full scope of their success. The eliminated commander had been planning a coordinated assault involving over 300 fighters and multiple suicide bombers. His death had effectively dismantled months of preparation and saved countless lives on both sides of the conflict. Sarah's shot had changed the course of the war in their sector, but she knew that tomorrow would bring new threats and new missions. The medal ceremony was scheduled for Sarah's final week in Afghanistan, though she had no idea what awaited her. Command had been deliberately vague about the details, simply ordering her to report to the main briefing hall in dress uniform. As she walked across the base, fellow soldiers stopped their conversations to watch her pass, their expressions mixing respect with something approaching awe. Inside the briefing hall, Sarah was surprised to find representatives from multiple allied nations, including several high-ranking officers she had only seen in photographs. At the center of the room stood a table covered with a black cloth, concealing something that would soon change how she viewed her own service. Captain Rodriguez gestured for her to approach the front of the assembled crowd. The commanding general stepped forward, holding a folder that contained Sarah's complete mission records. "Sergeant Martinez," he began, his voice carrying across the silent room, "your service in this theater of operations has been nothing short of extraordinary. In 18 months of combat deployment, you have completed over 200 successful missions with a confirmed kill count that exceeds any sniper in modern military history." Sarah felt her heart racing as the general continued, reading from her service record. Each major engagement was documented in clinical detail, the distances, conditions, and strategic impact of her shots. But it was the final number that caused murmurs of amazement from the assembled officers. 305 confirmed kills, each one verified through multiple intelligence sources and battlefield observations. The black cloth was pulled away to reveal a custom-made Barrett M82 sniper rifle, its metal surfaces polished to a mirror finish. But what made Sarah's breath catch was the small brass plate mounted near the stock, engraved with her name, service number, and the number 305. The rifle was a masterpiece of precision engineering, built specifically to commemorate her unprecedented achievement in combat. This weapon, the general explained, represents not just your individual accomplishments, but the lives saved through your actions. Intelligence estimates indicate that your eliminations of high-value targets prevented over 50 planned attacks against coalition and civilian targets. The bomb makers, commanders, and weapons specialists you eliminated were directly responsible for hundreds of casualties before their deaths. As Sarah accepted the commemorative rifle, she thought about each of those 305 shots. Some had been taken from impossible distances in perfect conditions, while others were made in the chaos of active combat, with bullets flying around her position. Each one represented a split-second decision that changed the course of the war in some small but significant way. The ceremony concluded with the presentation of several medals, including the Silver Star for gallantry in action and the Bronze Star for meritorious service in a combat zone. But Sarah found herself staring at the engraved number on her rifle, still struggling to process the magnitude of what she had accomplished. 305 confirmed kills made her the deadliest sniper in American military history, surpassing records that had stood for decades. After the ceremony, Sarah was approached by a young corporal she had never seen before. He appeared nervous, clutching a standard-issue M82 that showed obvious signs of malfunction. "Sergeant Martinez," he stammered, "I heard about your ceremony and I was wondering if you could help me with this rifle. It's been jamming constantly and my unit ships out tomorrow." Sarah examined the weapon and quickly identified the problem: a worn firing pin that was causing misfires and extraction failures. It was a common issue with heavily used rifles, but one that could prove fatal in combat if not addressed. She spent the next hour working with the corporal, teaching him how to properly maintain his weapon and avoid the mechanical problems that had been plaguing his shooting. As they worked together, Sarah realized that this interaction captured the true meaning of her service better than any ceremony or medal. Her 305 kills were not about personal achievement or military records. They were about protecting soldiers like this nervous young corporal who would soon face the same dangers she had encountered during her deployment. The following morning, Sarah boarded the transport aircraft that would begin her journey home to the United States. As the plane lifted off from the Afghan runway, she looked down at the mountainous landscape that had been both her battlefield and her classroom for the past 18 months. The woman returning home was fundamentally different from the one who had arrived, shaped by experiences that few people could understand or imagine. In her personal kit, carefully wrapped and secured, was the commemorative rifle with its brass plate bearing the number 305. But Sarah knew that the real measure of her service was not in the kills she had made, but in the lives she had saved, and the soldiers who would return home to their families because of her actions. The number on the rifle told only part of her story. The rest would remain with her forever, a private burden carried by those who serve in the deadliest profession in warfare. The adjustment to civilian life proved more challenging than any mission Sarah had faced in Afghanistan. The small Texas town where she had grown up felt impossibly quiet after 18 months of constant vigilance and life-or-death decisions. Simple activities like grocery shopping became exercises in tactical awareness, as Sarah unconsciously scanned for threats and escape routes that existed only in her combat-trained mind. Her grandfather noticed the changes immediately when she visited him at the family ranch. The confident young woman who had left for Afghanistan had returned as a hardened warrior, carrying invisible wounds that only other veterans could truly understand. During their first shooting session together since her return, he watched as Sarah effortlessly placed 10 rounds through a single hole at 300 meters, her skills honed to an almost supernatural level. "You've seen things that no person should have to see," he said quietly as they walked back from the range. "But you did what needed to be done and you brought our boys home safe. That's what matters." Sarah nodded, grateful for his understanding but still struggling to reconcile the person she had become with the life she was expected to resume. The media attention began slowly, with a local newspaper article about the hometown hero who had broken military records in Afghanistan. But the story quickly gained national attention, and Sarah found herself thrust into a spotlight she neither wanted nor felt comfortable occupying. Reporters called constantly, seeking interviews about her experiences and the psychological impact of her unprecedented kill count. Sarah declined most media requests, preferring to let her service record speak for itself. When she did agree to interviews, she consistently redirected attention away from her personal achievements toward the sacrifices made by all service members and their families. The 305 confirmed kills were not a source of pride for her, but rather a sobering reminder of the human cost of warfare. The Department of Defense eventually assigned Sarah to a training position at the sniper school, where her military career had begun. Her expertise and combat experience made her invaluable as an instructor, and she found purpose in passing her knowledge to the next generation of precision marksmen. The students initially seemed intimidated by her reputation, but Sarah's patient teaching style and genuine concern for their development quickly earned their respect. During one training exercise, a young recruit approached Sarah with questions about dealing with the psychological pressure of taking human lives. Sarah recognized the same doubts and fears she had experienced during her own training, and she took time to explain the reality of a sniper's role in protecting innocent lives and supporting fellow soldiers. Her words carried weight that no classroom lecture could match. The commemorative rifle with its engraved brass plate found a place of honor in Sarah's apartment, but she rarely looked at it. The number 305 represented 18 months of her life when every decision carried life or death consequences, when her accuracy with a rifle meant the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. Those experiences had shaped her in ways that continued to unfold years after her return from combat. Sarah began volunteering with veteran support organizations, using her unique perspective to help other returning soldiers adjust to civilian life. She understood the isolation and disconnection that many veterans experienced, having walked that difficult path herself. Her work with PTSD support groups provided a sense of purpose that extended far beyond her military achievements. The young corporal, whose jammed rifle had led to their meeting after the medal ceremony, stayed in touch through letters and emails. He had completed his deployment successfully and credited Sarah's weapon maintenance tips with saving his life during several combat engagements. Their ongoing correspondence reminded Sarah that her legacy extended beyond statistics and records to the individual lives she had touched. As years passed, Sarah found peace in the knowledge that her service had meaning beyond the numbers engraved on a brass plate. The 305 confirmed kills represented 305 moments when she had made the ultimate professional decision under impossible pressure. But more importantly, they represented the countless lives saved through her actions and the soldiers who returned home because of her precision and dedication. The small Texas town that had once seemed too quiet gradually became a sanctuary where Sarah could process her experiences and build a new life. She married a fellow veteran who understood her journey, and together they created a family that honored both their service and their hope for a more peaceful future. The woman who had once been the deadliest sniper in military history found her greatest victory in the simple act of coming home and learning to live with the consequences of her extraordinary service to her country.